This character is painfully sad, but they're not a tragedy. What I mean is what happened to them isn't some absurd accident. The character known as Evil Eye was tortured because of something any decent person is capable of: ignorance. And it's the ignorance of the Kito family and everyone in town that turned a silly myth into a real monster. That's why in this video, I'd like to analyze the backstory of Dandadan's newest villain, discuss the way human insecurities turn phobias into freaks, and explain how Evil Eye teaches us that even the ugliest monsters are often the saddest victims. Just be warned that there will be spoilers. Now, if you're caught up with Dandadan, then I'm sure you already have a problem with what I'm saying, because here I am saying that Evil Eye is a victim, but he's also the same monster that wants to destroy all humans and deliberately tries to kill Momo. He even emits the same psychic waves as the Deathworm that make everyone want to harm themselves. Clearly, Evil Eye isn't some innocent victim, and they're just as evil as something like the Deathworm. And you would be right to say that, but you would also be wrong. On the one hand, Evil Eye is far from innocent. See, there's a difference between being justified and having an excuse. Nobody would say Evil Eye is justified in wanting to kill everyone just because he was mistreated. This does give him an excuse, but it still doesn't mean what he's doing is any less terrible. So to that point, Evil Eye isn't innocent. Now, on the other hand, this doesn't make them evil either, which sounds ridiculous considering his name is literally Evil Eye, but just hear me out. We said before that Evil Eye and the Deathworm are the same, and they are. Neither of them are inherently evil. They're both destructive because of the evil forced on them by humans. The Deathworm has evil powers because it was fed human sacrifices, and Evil Eye has these evil powers because of the way he was treated by the Kito family. And this is where we can see how Evil Eye actually started out innocent before he became a monster. When we get his backstory, we find out that Evil Eye was separated from everyone else in town. We don't know if he was always like this. We don't even know why they singled him out. His parents might have died, they might have sold him as a sacrifice. All we know is that he's singled out and trapped in this tiny little prison where all he can do is watch the other kids play from this tiny window. And that is his entire life. All we ever see him do is watch the other kids play and then pretend to play with them. It's unfair because he seems innocent and there's no reason for him to be singled out. But for no good reason, he's stuck in a prison while the other kids get to go out and play. It's this sense of other that naturally makes Evil Eye envious. And envy is going to come up again later in the video, so just keep that theme in the back of your mind. But the point is, Evil Eye is only envious because of the way he's singled out. Of course, the ultimate evil is when the Kito family ties him to a pole and gives him to the Deathworm. Except, the Deathworm never comes. Evil Eye is melted by the volcano and somehow survives just to get left for dead and eaten alive by crows until he slowly dies. As a result, when the Kito family continues to sacrifice other people, the ghost of this child vows to get revenge and becomes the character we now know as Evil Eye. Obviously, this is extremely tragic, but like I said, this was all completely avoidable. The reason this happened is because everyone put their phobias on a lonely kid. But before I say more on that, make sure to check out my next live stream if you're enjoying the video. I host discussions on anime and manga every week, and I even review new Dandadan chapters every Monday. But like I was saying, the real tragedy of Evil Eye's death is that it was for the dumbest reason. As Manjiro explains to Momo, the only reason the legend of the Deathworm exists is because of fear. Everyone fears what they don't understand, like the volcano eruptions and the wrath of the gods. It's that fear that deprives them of rational thought and leads them to human sacrifice. And that's what I mean when I say that what happened to Evil Eye isn't some random tragedy. As humans, we are all scared of what we don't understand. This causes us to single people out and identify them as other. It's the whole reason behind the whole us versus them mentality. We don't understand someone else, so we make up stories about them to marginalize them and justify treating them like less than a person. Now, to that point, you might argue that what I'm saying is a bit of a stretch. In other words, there's a big difference between the bullying that goes on every day and the human sacrifice to a Mongolian deathworm. At the very least, not everyone is out here making human sacrifices sacrifices. We might all be insecure, but that doesn't make us bad people. And on the surface, it's easy to see why you would say that. The Kito family feared the volcano, so they singled someone out and sacrificed them. Obviously, that's pretty extreme, and it's not something you see every day. But the way their fear and insecurity led them to single out someone they didn't even know is something that happens every day all around the world. In fact, it's exactly why the story of the evil eye is one of the most culturally common myths in society. If you live in the Mediterranean region, or you were raised with some kind of Mediterranean heritage, then the evil eye is something you've heard of since you were a kid. It's a symbol families in Italy, Greece, Turkey, almost all over the world can instantly recognize, and it's a myth as old as mankind. Every culture has their own interpretation of the origins and the meaning, but the basic idea is that any person around you can curse you at any time simply by looking at you. It's why my fellow Italians wear those silly chili peppers, and why everyone else carries those weird blue rocks. It's because they're scared someone's gonna give them a filthy look and then they'll suddenly go bald and lose their teeth, or whatever. And while every story is different, there's one common theme among all of them: envy. The whole idea is that we don't want to look at the people less fortunate than we are, so we created this myth that if we do look at them, we'll get cursed. And that's why I pointed it out before, because if you know about the evil eye, then you know that Tatsu did a fantastic job of representing it. In the story of Evil Eye, he is cast out and forced to watch the other kids play. This is where he learns envy. He watches the other kids play while he can't, so it basically becomes his whole identity. So the biggest source of his powers is envy. Then, when he finally becomes a yokai, what does he say to the Kito family? That's right, look at me. And this line has two meanings that are both incredibly powerful. First of all, it resembles the real story of Evil Eye and how people can curse others just by looking at them. But even more importantly, this implies the nature of the Kito family's real sin. They never looked at the child. Notice the whole time he was trapped in jail, we never see anyone pay any attention to him. Not once did anyone look at him. Even when that one kid could see him as a ghost, he tried not to see him. Evil Eye was singled out and forced to feel like a freak, causing him to envy the other kids and always dreaming of playing with someone. And this is the everyday sin that we are all guilty of, turning a blind eye to the freaks and outcasts of the world. Part of the Evil Eye myth is envy, but the other side to that is some fortunate person trying hard not to look at someone less fortunate. It's the idea that they don't want whatever curse that other person has. We don't want their trouble, so we don't even treat them like a person. And we're all guilty of this. The Kito family and everyone in town did it to Evil Eye. We all probably did it in school when someone was the weird kid, so we decided we weren't gonna talk to them. The bullies ignore them because they're insecure, so they cast out the kid they decide is weird to avoid dealing with that insecurity. And the other kids join in because they don't want to be ignored or called weird. We even do it today every time we order coffee or fast food. Every time someone comes to fix our house or deliver a package. We look at that person working their butt off with no help and we say thanks. But how often do we truly thank them? How often do we stop to find out how their day is going or show them that someone, anyone, cares about them? Probably not that often. This leads us to feel content, but it leads everyone else to feel like they're the butt of some sick joke. Like they have this sign on them that says, "Don't talk to me," making them feel ignored and envious of the other people around them. The Dandadan story might be an extreme example, but it stems from the same sin that we repeat every day. Evil Eye is a myth that we turned into a real monster. If someone had just stopped to help him, maybe things would have been different. In fact, it's not unlike the story of Beauty and the Beast. The prince turned away the beggar because she was ugly, but it was his ugliness that created a real monster. The Kito family feared monsters, but it was their phobia that turned an innocent boy into the ultimate evil. And this is why it's so genius that Tatsu pairs him with Gigi. By now, we know that Gigi is a social butterfly. He says hi to everyone and he makes friends without even trying. At first, Gigi wants to get rid of Evil Eye because he's giving him nightmares and he almost killed his parents. But when he finds out about Evil Eye's backstory, he decides he wants to protect him. He runs all the way to the bottom of the house and discovers Evil Eye's corpse. There he feels bad for Evil Eye and offers to play with him. Granted, this doesn't really change Evil Eye because he's still batshit crazy, but it's the first time someone acknowledges him as a person and reaches out to him, which is all he ever wanted. We even see this later in the story. I won't spoil it for anime-only fans, but this theme of persuading Evil Eye by promising to play with him is something that comes up again. It's basically his entire motivation, hence why pairing him with a social butterfly like Gigi is so genius. You have a kid that nobody would play with, and the kid who wants to hang out with everybody. It's a win-win. The other reason this is brilliant is because it's ironic. Remember, it wasn't long ago that Gigi was one of the bullies. When Momo would do her ritual, Gigi didn't understand it, so he got the other kids to call her weird and make fun of her. Not exactly the same, but it's the same basic idea, dehumanizing what we don't understand. In this sense, it's a bit of poetic justice that Gigi gets possessed by a kid that was made out to be a victim his entire life, but it also serves as the perfect turning point. Here, we see Gigi redeem himself and illustrate that he's a completely different person. He's learned the pain of being marginalized and understands that you should treat everyone with some decency, especially when nobody else will. And this is the lesson that Evil Eye teaches the audience. He may be the victim of a human sacrifice to appease a giant volcano worm, but at the end of the day, he's someone we've all met before. The weird kid at school, the delivery person that we don't say hi to, the person on the street that makes us pull up our phone so we don't have to look at them. The sin of this character's death is the same mistake we make every day when we ignore someone who's different and make a conscious decision to give into our own insecurities. We don't have to live our lives like golden retrievers and treat everyone like our best friend, but you never know what people are going through. Sometimes just asking someone how they're doing and showing them that anyone cares is enough to change their life. But we don't do that because we're too afraid of our own insecurities. And that is the tragedy of the Evil Eye. But maybe I'm wrong. How would you describe Evil Eye? What did you take away from their story? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to think down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to watch my next live stream and join the channel. Members get custom badges and emojis, they can pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also check out my other Dandadan videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.